Shalom. All praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah, Kodash. Double honors to my apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to my brothers teaching this word. This is Exodus 11, verse 7. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against a man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord Yahweh doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. Yahweh Shemel Shai put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And we Negroes, primarily from the southern kingdom, who today, through Esau, Edom, lies, and mockery, calling our people black, the southern kingdom, Israeli, and the so-called Negroes are really Israelites of the southern kingdom. They're not Africans, even though in Africa, primarily west coast of Africa, that's Jake over there, but the native people of Africa, what they call Africa, is really the children of Ham, the descendants of one of Ham's 4 sons. For instance, the Egyptians here, today, they're known as the Sudanese, those tall ass, heathens that are very, dark, but they're not, Jake type of dark, they're just purple, man, and the another son of Ham is Cush, which are those East Africans, those Ethiopians, Eritreans, Somalians, those are the children of Cush, and Put, is so-called North Africans, and Canaan, so-called South Africans, these are the sons of Ham, these are descendants of Ham, and the Bantus, are Israelites, even though, the children of Israel, especially us from the southern kingdom, are dark skinned, have a high melanin, even these other nations, especially Hamites, they have high melanin, but we're not the same people. We come from different lineages, different lines. Negroes, we come from the line of Shem. The Hamites, so-called Africans, the real Africans, they come from the line of Ham. Two different, lineages, man. In fact, we're more closer to the Edomites, the so-called Arabs, the Ishmaelites, the so-called Chinese, the Japanese, who are Moab and Ammon, we're more closer to them than the actual Africans, because the so-called white man, the Chinese, the Arabs, and the Japanese, they're from the lineage of Shem as well, but we know that Yahweh Shemashai has chosen the chosen line, did come from Shem, but it went down from Abraham and rested upon Jacob, But the reason why I said that is to point out that we're more closer to these to the so-called white man, to the Chinese, than the actual Africans, even though, like you might see Jake, you might see a person that has dark skin, today they'll call him black, that don't mean they're Israelites, because they're Africans, the real Hamites, they have dark skin. Like we read here, the Lord put a difference between Egyptians and Israel. And I'll show you an example, like when you see a crocodile and an alligator, when people look at it from a far view, they look similar, they look the same. But when you zoom in, you can clearly tell that they're different. The way their beak is structured, the way they look, when you get close up to them, they're completely different. You can tell a Jake from a Hamite, man, because here's an example. Salakia. This is Exodus 1:19. And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Egyptian, the Hebrew, talking about the Israelite woman, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, which are the Hamites, of the seed of Mizraim, because the Egyptians are really the Mizraimites, for they are lively. So the Israelite women, the Hebrew women, which is the Israelite woman, are more lively than the Egyptian woman, meaning Jake has spirit, man. Jake has soul. These other nations, when you look at them, they're dull. That's what I mean by Jake has soul. I don't mean it like the other nations don't have a soul. I mean it that Jake is just more, more lively, more energy. Jake has more spirit to them. These other nations, they can't, have the spirit that we have, and the spirit was made by Yahweh Shemashai. The Lord, gave us a special spirit. We're lively people, man. The other nations, they're dull. They can't, that's why when you see the other nations dancing and moving about, man, it's cheesy. They don't know how to rhythm. They don't, dance on key. They don't, move in rhythm. They just look goofy and they look like robots when they're dancing. But when Jake is dancing, Jake is lively, man. Jake is on beat. Jake is, the salt of the earth. Even our women are lively, man, because they're still Israelites. All our people, we're special spirits, man, because the Lord made us special spirits. So like Yahweh Shemashai gave us these traits, because the Lord gave certain heathens different traits, like the Elamites, they always love to like bump their head about, move their head back and forth, and the so-called Arabs, the Ishmaelites, they live in deserts, and then they love camels and shit. Certain settings that the Lord made the different nations, like gives them different characteristics. And Esau, like, he likes to climb rocks, he likes to be outdoors, he likes to hunt. So each nation that the Lord created, he gave them like different traits. And we Israelites, we're like chill people, man. We're peaceful, like our forefather Jacob, was a plain man dwelling in tents. Jacob was a peaceful man. We're normally, as a nation, we're chill people. Jake likes to chill. And we're the only ones that are really lively, because these other nations, they're not like us. The Lord made us and gave us a special spirit, man. The Egyptian women, they couldn't do what our women can do. And like I read earlier, the Lord put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. Yeah, the two sets of people have color, melanin, dark skin. But guess what? The one people are heathens, and other people are the people of the Lord. And you got Esau always saying, "Oh, blacks sold blacks into slavery." That's not the case. Yeah, you did have some wicked jakes that sold each other out of our people. You have wicked men among our nation. But it's really those Hamites that sold Jake into slavery, man, as well as the Arabs, the Ishmaelites. It wasn't really like Esau likes to point out, or black people sold black people. First of all, not everyone that's so-called has color is of the same people. You have East Indians, primarily Sri Lankans, they're dark as hell. They're darker than some of us, but they're not lumped as black, and that shows you that black thing is a negative connotation on the children of Israel, primarily of the southern kingdom. We ain't got nothing to do with these other nations, man. Yeah, the only thing that we might have similar is like the color, but we're completely different spirits. We don't put bones in our mouth. We don't stick our head up cows' asses. We don't do none of that shit. And if any of our people doing that shit, they're learning it from the heathen. And what did the Lord say? Because we're not meant to be buddies with these heathens, man. And those Hamites, man. Let me find the scripture. But those Hamites, man, they were our big enemies back in the ancient world. King David used to fight them, man. Those Philistines, those motherfuckers, man. Those tall ass, heathens, man. Them dark purple ass, dusty ass heathens, man. That used to fight us. And Ham is one of our enemies too, man. They played a huge role as well in the slave trade. Ham's gonna get fucked up too, man. We ain't the same people, man. Don't let skin color fool you. yeah, you're gonna have even Israelites that look like them, you know, and I'm gonna try and get into that as well, you know. But the actual Hamites, the people that descended of Ham, they're our enemies too, you know. Just because they're dark skinned don't mean that we're cool. The Lord ain't cool with them, you know. Yahweh Shemashai destroyed Egypt, you know, and the heathens are going into slavery as well when Yahweh Shai comes back, and that includes the Hamites. This is Leviticus 18:3. After the doings of the land of Egypt, where ye dwelt, ye shall not do, because we were slaves in Egypt. You know, we're not meant to be doing the things that the things that were happening in Egypt. And you know, America is the modern day Egypt, man. You know, they brought back certain things that was happening in Egypt. You know, and Jake as well back then is following after the ways of Egypt, man, which is the way of the heathen. And the Lord told us not to do that, because the actual Egyptians were heathens, man. You know, they ain't good people, man. You know, Jake would like, oh, what about the ancient Egyptians? You know, Jake, because a lot of our people have an identity crisis, and it makes sense because we're where people robbed and spoiled. You know, and Yahweh Shemashah took away our heritage as a punishment. You know, that's why, you know, you got a lot of confusion among, you know, Jake. You know, our people don't know what we are. You know, but now we know, thanks to Yahweh Shemashah. You know, the Lord has given us back our heritage, because the Lord wants a remnant to come back to Him. You know, but most of our people, you know, before this truth, man, thought they were black, thought they were African. You know, all those things that Esau put on our people. You know, but that's not the case. We're really the children of Israel. You know, we got nothing to do with Africa. The reason why we were in Africa in the first place is because we used to go down there to escape persecution. You know, because we could hide amongst those Hamites because they were dark skinned. You know, it don't mean that, you know, we're the same people as those Hamites. No, you know, we just went in there as refugees. And after 70 AD, you know, a lot of our people went into Africa, especially the west coast of Africa. You know, and Jake built, you know, empires. You know, I think it was known as the Kingdom of Judah in West Africa. You know, that's why most of the slave trade happened in West Africa, because the Book of Israel, you know, when they went into the interiors of Africa, went to the west parts of Africa. You know, Esau calls it Bantu people, but it's really children of Israel. You know, and so, and now you got our people, you know, thinking that the Egyptians. No, you know, yeah, the Egyptians are people of color, you know, but they're not our people. We're not the same. They're heathens, man. You know, and you want to see the real Egyptians, could look up South Sudanese, man. You know, those tall ass, you know, dark, you know, purple ass heathens, man, that be sticking their head inside a cow, you know. And you can look at them, man. You can see that we ain't the same people, man. You know, even though you're gonna have Jake's cat among them, you know, but we ain't the same people, you know. And that same thing applies to those Ethiopians too, man. You know, they're heathens too. You know, those bubbleheads, you know, they're heathens too. You know, they're Cushites, you know. And you're also gonna have Jake scattered among them. And he had an account of the Ethiopian eunuch. He was an Israelite that was scattered among them, you know, because you have our people, because we've been in captivity among these Hamites, man. You know, and a lot of our people are still over there too, among them, you know, catching hell, being, you know, violated by these heathens. And they're gonna pay when Yahweh Shai comes. And the elect among them are gonna come back to Yahweh Shai and get saved. The elect among our people of the elect among these other nations where they're scattered. Because as you read here, you know, let me just finish this off and I'll get that. Shall ye not do, and after the doings of the land of Canaan, which another group of Hamites, where I bring you, ye shall not do, neither shall ye walk in their ordinances, you know, meaning their way of life. You should not be imitating the way of the life of the heathen, you know. And these Egyptians, these Canaanites, they were just, you know, melanated heathens. That's what they really were, man. You know, and having melanin don't mean you're, you know, even though having melanin is a beautiful thing, but it's like having two eyes and two legs, you know. It's just normal. You know, what makes us great is that Yahweh Shemashai chose us, and the Lord made us of His people. That's what makes us great, not because of our skin color. It's because of our spirit that the Lord chose, and it's all because of Yahweh Shemashai. You know, we're great because the Lord made us, you know, great. But right now we're under curses, you know, and that's talking about us real Israelites, you know. And our people, you know, they want to follow the way of the heathen, man. Our people think that they're Egyptians, they're Africans, you know, because Jake, you know, is bugged out, man, because we've been very heavily oppressed and lied to, and a lot of people are sick. We need salvation, man. And the remnant is going to return to Yahweh Shai and ultimately get the salvation in Yahweh Shai. And as a nation, we're all going to be all right in the kingdom. We're all going to be having our true identity back. And having our ruling in our kingdom, in the kingdom of our Lord. And these other nations are going to be our slaves, and that includes these hamites too. So let me get that scripture. I think it was Isaiah, because Salakia, is it Isaiah 10 or Isaiah 11? I think it's Isaiah 11. Yeah, the reason why I'm bringing this one out is because, those hamites, those so-called Africans are hamites. But what you gotta understand is not everyone in the land of Africa is a hamite. Primarily the bulk of the people in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, the Gold Coast, that's Jacob. That's our people over there. You had a lot of our people that are still there, man, that didn't go into the slave trade. And you had wicked Jakes that were, giving away fellow Jakes to, Esau, man. And you also ultimately had Ham and Ishmael selling us to those fucking Edomites, man. And these heathens are gonna pay, man. But you got a lot of our people still in the land of Africa. And you also got our people, among various nations too. And wherever we are, we're at the bottom and we're catching hell. This is Isaiah 11 verse 11, the restored remnant in the blue letter. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand the second time, because the first time that the Lord delivered us, it was really the bulk of all Israel at the time of Egypt. But on this side, the second time, the Lord's only going to deliver a remnant, like it's saying here, and which is coming in this time period now, when Yahweh Shai returns, because he's going to gather the elect from the four corners of the earth, via the chariots, and the Lord's going to dispatch the angels to gather his elect. The Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, and the Lord's people are the Israelites. So the Lord's going to get a remnant of children of Israel, which are left in from Assyria and from Egypt. So you have our people in Assyria. Remember, the Assyrians had us in captivity, man, especially the northern kingdom, and we know that the northern kingdom went to the Americas, but you still had remnants of the northern tribes that were still there, in Assyria, even at the time of Yahweh Shai. But the bulk of the northern kingdom went to the so-called America, and today the northern kingdom are the Latinos, Native Americans, and Hispanics, of indigenous descent, but you also had no remnants of the northern kingdom left, because our people, the southern kingdom went into the Babylonian captivity, the northern kingdom went into the Assyrian captivity, so you're gonna have Jake in the Assyrian captivity of the that's still left there, that's scattered among them, looking like them as well, because we intermingled with these heathens, even dressed like them, walking like them, talking like them. But once they hear this truth, and like the Lord said, He's going to recover the remnant, which is the elect, they're going to ultimately come in Yahweh Shai, and they're going to believe, and they're going to be saved. And also from Egypt, even among those South Sudanese, those Nilotic people, those tall ass Hamites, you can have Jake that look like them, scattered among them, talking like them, and the day of the elect, they're going to, gravitate to Yahweh Shai, gravitate to this word, which is Yahweh Shai. And from Paphros, I think Paphros is like, I think it's North Africa, but there's Jake over there too. And from Cush, like I said, the Ethiopians, among the Ethiopians, the Somalians, the Eritreans, you can have Jake over there too, that rapper that died, Nipsey Hussle, man, he most likely could be a Jake that was scattered amongst those Eritreans, because our people have talent and our people have flavor. Jake's gonna shine, but we're under curses though. So a lot of our people that are over there are gonna be suffering and catching hell from the actual heathen. For instance, a Jake that's scattered amongst Cush is gonna be catching hell under the Cushites, who are the heathen. And you know what the Lord's gonna do to these Ethiopians when He comes. You Ethiopians also shall be slain by my sword. So the Ethiopians are gonna get mashed up, The Lord's gonna get those heathens too, man, because they had us in slavery too. Nimrod was a so-called Ethiopian, and he's going into slavery too, But you have our people among them, scattered among them, and if they're of the elect, they're gonna gravitate to Yahweh Shai. They're gonna gravitate to this truth and ultimately be delivered by Yahweh Shai when he comes. And from Elam, the East Indians, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, from Iraq, from other places around there in Asia Minor, and also from the islands of the sea where Japheth is. You're gonna have Jake scattered among them too, and he shall set up, and also Elam, which is those Pakistanis and Indians and Iranians. You can have Jake among them too. You have the cities, you have the untouchable, Jake that are catching hell over there, and some of them that are off the elect, but very few of them that are off the elect, are gonna gravitate to the truth and ultimately get saved when Yahweh Shai returns and repent. And he shall set up an ensign of the nations, and he shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Yep, the elect are going to be gathered. And the reason why I brought out Isaiah 11 and 11 is to show you that, even among these Hamite nations, you're going to have Jake scattered among them, But the actual heathens, this was going to happen to them. This is for the actual heathen. Salakia. I think I spelled it wrong. Yeah, this is Isaiah 45 verse 14. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, the labor of Egypt and the merchandise of Ethiopia and of the Sabians. These are Hamite nations, men of stature, because the Hamites, especially the Egyptians, are known for their height. So and Goliath, he was a Philistine, which is really an Egyptian. Because the Philistines were just Mizraimites, man. Living next to Canaan. Because when our people, starting with Joshua, to slaughter those Canaanites and the Lord, we took the land that really belongs to us, because Yahweh Shai gave us that land. The heathens were always in our land, but ultimately the Lord had them get spewed out. The heathens were always, trying to take our part, but the Lord spewed them out, and the Lord's going to spew out these Idumeans, these Amalekites, and the rest of the heathen that are there out, in this time, But those Philistines, they go back to the Egyptians, those Mizraimites. So Goliath was an Egyptian, and he was tall as hell, and you saw what the Lord had happened to him. And like I said earlier, those Hamites were one of our biggest enemies in the ancient world, So don't forget about those motherfuckers, man. We're not the same people, man. They're going into captivity when Yahweh Shai comes, and they're going to be our slaves, man. Because we were their slaves in ancient Egypt, They're going to be our slaves, man. And men of stature shall come unto thee, and they shall be thine, meaning they're going to be our possessions, and all these heathens, man, they shall come after thee in chains. So we're going to have them in chains. These, proud ass Africans, that look down on Jake. Jake gonna have them in chains, man. We're gonna have them in chains. We're gonna have them in fucking chains, man. These proud ass, South Sudanese, Ethiopians, Canaanites, South Africans, those that are not Jake though, because you got a lot of Jake in South Africa. You got, the Bantu, that's Jake. So you got a lot of Jake in South Africa. I'm talking about the actual heathen over there, that go back to Canaan and on various Hamitic nations. They are a fucking enemy, man. And they had a hand in our downfall. They sold us, with the Arabs, the Ishmaelites, to the hand of the Egyptians, to the Grecians, which is the Edomites. So they got something coming for them, man. They shall come after thee in chains, because that's what they're going into. They're going into chains. They shall come over and they shall fall down unto thee. So these, dark ass Hamites, they're going into slavery too. It's not only the white man that's going to be in slavery. It's the rest of these nations too. And they shall make supplication unto thee, saying, surely the Most High is in thee. Meaning that the heathens are gonna ultimately admit that we are the Lord's people, man, because it's gonna be evident. we're going to be glowing. We're going to have spiritual powers, and they're going to be in chains, and they're going to see, the great salvation of the elect, and they're going to see Yahweh Shai, coming in His glory. So the heathen ain't going to have shit to say. They're just going to be in chains, bowing down and begging for mercy. And in 1,000 years, they're just going to get a hard ass whooping. But then we're going to release them, except for the Edomites. We're going to release these other nations, and they're going to be on the pay as you go, and they're going to be under our dominion forever. But these Edomites, they're going to be exterminated. The Most High is India. There's none else, and there's no power, meaning that they're going to acknowledge that our power, Yahweh Shemashai, is the true God, and He's with us. Right now, the heathen, they look down on Jake, but very soon, man, they're going to be respecting Jake when Yahweh Shai comes back, So yeah, man, Negroes are not Africans. Our people dwell in Africa because we were refugees escaping persecution, especially from the Romans, and also, our people were in Egypt. Some of our people loved it down there. You had a lot of Jake in Alexandria, Egypt. You also had Jake amongst those Cushites too. Like I read in Isaiah 11 and 11, the elect is going to come out of these various nations, man. Some of these nations are Hamite nations, and the elect are going to come out of them. So because you have Israelites scattered among these nations, but the actual heathen, they got chains waiting for them. The actual descendants of Ham and these other nations, that are not Israelites, they got chains coming for them, man. So yeah, man, Negroes are not Hamites. Negroes are Shemites from the lineage of Abraham on down to Jacob. Are Israelites from the southern kingdom. There's a difference, man. And everyone's gonna know that very soon. Because right now Esau has caused a lot of confusion, man, and has lumped our people into a ham. Because Esau knows that if our people are confused and not in their right mind and not correct, they're not connected to Yahweh Shemashai, we will be in this captivity state. But the heathen get scared when we come back to our power, and you're seeing right now the elect are coming back to Yahweh Shemashai through Yahweh Shai. So yeah, man, I want to give all praises to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai Bashem Rakah Kodash, double honors to my apostles, the elders, great millstone. Shalom to my brothers and sisters, listen and learn.